7, I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen to order. 4 of the selectmen are present. Marie D'Souza is out of town and unreachable, so she won't be joining us tonight. Pledge of Allegiance. Selectman Nordell, would you like to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have meeting minutes to review. In your packet, we'll start with July 7th. Comments, corrections?
To approve the regular meeting minutes from July 7th, 2022.
Second. Made and seconded. Any discussion or corrections? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Minutes are approved. July 13th.
To approve the special meeting minutes from July 13th, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Jason, it was Sarah and Alan on both, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Public participation. This is one of 2 opportunities for members of the public to address the Board of Selectmen. I'll start with members in the room and then I'll turn to anybody who's with us online. Please state your name and address for the record. You, sir.
Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street, Broadbrook. A comment about the June 2nd meeting where the proposed blight ordinance was first put on the table. And you spent hour and 15 minutes discussing it, but 4 out of 5 selectmen had issues. And some of them were substantial. 75% of properties in town being in violation is a statement that was made, and that's pretty substantial. And you played around with some words and diddly-do and sent it off to the lawyer. That was an opportunity for 4 out of 5 selectmen to say, don't bother. So it's gone, and here we are with a more complex version. I'm sorry, not a complex version, a lawyered version that you will again discuss. My opinion is total waste of time. The chances of getting this through are close to 0. And, I appreciate some of the issues in town, but I don't like the idea of putting pressure on the majority of taxpayers because of a few situation. So that's where I'm at, but it'll go to town meeting eventually. It will be a little bit there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other comments from anybody here present? Any other comments from anybody here present? Any other comments? Is there anybody online who would like to address the members of the Board of Selectmen? If so, please unmute yourself, give your name and your address, and state your business. Okay. I don't have any communications this evening. We do have some reappointments. That's under 7B, 1, 2, and 3. They're all the different boards. No, two of the 3 are different boards. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the reappointment of David Swain, Capital Improvement Planning Committee, regular member term for a term expiring July 31st, 2023, and if you'll allow also for Robert Leach for the same term and same group.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appointments are so ordered. Number 3.
Make a motion to reappoint Albert Grant to the Agricultural Commission, regular term member for a term expiring August 1, 2025.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Ms. Calabrese, you want to come up and join us? So as was mentioned, we looked at the blight ordinance draft back in June. Comments from the selectmen have been incorporated into that. It's been reviewed by council. You want to walk us through what the changes are or take further comments? Everyone do. Let's walk through the changes.
The majority of changes, they represent what was discussed at the last Board of Selectmen. Those were incorporated and then the draft was sent over to our town attorney's office. Attorney McCann went through and he, if you look at the copy that was provided to you, his comments are in blue. Some of them are format oriented, changing instead of the town of East Windsor, it's the town. Others are clarifying in nature. In a couple of definitions, he added two. Maintenance officer, there's some edits there, that's just for flow of language. The citation hearing officer, same thing, but we wanted to make sure we were in keeping with state statute and the electorate of the town included there. Inoperable jumped, those were terms and definitions. He wanted to make sure that that was towards vehicles. We've removed the term in its entirety, because we removed concept from the ordinances, the property maintenance assessment board. That definition came out, that's. So the majority of changes that took place in this meeting, the first review are in section 2-2, definition of standards. You see those in 2C, where we included retaining walls in exterior walls. Under 2D, added the language that says foundation walls which contain open cracks and breaks. We added that pose a threat to public health and safety. We removed G, insect screens containing stairs, or ragged edges.
Excuse me, can you speak up, please? I can't hear what you're saying.
This is supposed to step for you. I'll start with, I'll just run through the standards that were changed again.
Okay, thank you.
Under 2C, the exterior walls, retaining walls were added to be considered exterior walls. Under foundation walls that have cracks, open cracks or breaks, the qualifier that pose a threat to public health and safety was added. Removed in its entirety was a section on screens, insect screens that contain tears or ragged edges. There was a change to overgrown grass on the time frame. Grass 12 inches or more maintained for more than 14 days. That 7 days was changed to 14 days. I, vegetation of any type, which, and what got struck from the language was, in the opinion of the property maintenance officer, is injurious to public health or safety. Then down at, it used to be O, now it's M. The outdoor storage of wandered and or useful material or equipment for a period of more than 60 days in any front yard, or which is not being maintained in an orderly manner. And the language struck was, and is creating a blighting factor for adjacent properties. Under C, the exterior condition reflecting a level of maintenance which is not in keeping with community standards for which, and then the language struck was constitutes a blighting factor for adjacent property owners or occupiers or which. So now it reads, community standards or which is an element contributing to the progressive deterioration of the neighborhood. Or it's just the word a condition the town attorney added. Instead of it is, it took out the pronoun and replaced it with a condition. Same thing, with number 5. On 6, the last portion of the item was struck that says, and which contains condition that negatively impacts property values. And then added was a number 7, which is a condition which is negatively impacting neighborhood property values. The next section, section 3, is procedures, and the edits here are really to keep things clean. Town attorney struck. If there's any person, and he struck or legal entity, and he did that because a person, the definition of a person includes the legal entity. It's just making that clear. And then the next, back at the beginning, 7 looks like there's a lot of change there, but really we moved a paragraph, we joined C and D. And so D became 5, and that moved down. And then citations. The at the discretion of the property maintenance officer was struck. Page 8, there's several changes that the town attorney suggested, and really that speaks to the section itself is collection of funds, failure to pay fines. It speaks to notifications. He's just being very concise with language so that it matches the statutes. I don't think it changes in substance, but it just cleans up the language. The one thing that where we struck language that pointed to the assessments. I want to jump too far ahead. There was language in the hearing section. It's section previously F, now it's E, number 3. There was language in there that the presence of the property maintenance officer shall be required at the request if such person requests. And the town attorney is suggesting property maintenance officer should always be present and presenting evidence at the hearing. On page 9, this is the area to really I guess, pay attention to and deliberate. There's open questions here for the board. Remediation of violations by the town. This is where we struck, there was assessment language in here that we took out because it wasn't the intention to have it in here. We have that as a whole realm of regulations that you need. So A and E were struck because that spoke specifically to a special assessment. Down in mediation remediation of violations by the town, number 2. This points back to section 2.2, where it talks about the overgrown grass or weeds and any vegetation that's injurious to public health and safety. He's kind of flagging that for you to say, is it worthwhile? Given the effort that it would take to come in and, and then, try to get your money back. So the price you pay by doing it versus what you get. Caution. And what he's saying, he's just pointing out he doesn't think it's entirely worthwhile.
Good question for clarification there. So what that was saying is that we as a town, we're gonna go in and correct the problem and then expect to get reimbursed?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I don't think we should be doing that. I don't, okay.
There are statutory mechanisms to do that.
Mhm.
It's not impossible. It's just,
Right, well,
circumstances would have to be, to Ruth's point, is it worth the,
right.
Right, and it's really pointing to those 2 issues, the vegetation. And so it's kind of a landscape. And so under number 3, the town attorney is kind of opining that paragraph really is a building code jurisdiction item. And that the board should consider removing it. I would suggest that there could be language put in there that talks to collaboration with building officials. That's food for thought. And then the last change in there was one the board had put in, and that was to review the established like property maintenance on schedule on the basis of the reports.
thank you. Questions or comments? It is a pretty comprehensive, this is a dense document, but it is comprehensive. All right.
Sir. I mean, I agree that in some circumstance, well, first of all, thank you to Ruth and her staff for their work on this. I agree that in some circumstances, there is blatant disregard for property and it's needed, but my biggest concern is that we're going to be hurting the hardworking person who's struggling and is doing their best to maintain their lawn and doing projects one at a time and I just don't want to, and they might have a neighbor who's against them or something, and I just don't want it to be hurting the wrong people and not the people that have a blatant disregard for public, health and their property and I just want it to be enforceable in the right way where it's not hurting, like it was mentioned in public participation, 75% of the properties in town. And going through against, reading this over, there were some other things that kind of stuck out to me that really didn't stick out to me previously. Like community standard, a judgment by a reasonable member of the community. So that's left up to interpretation for one individual who could technically
Yeah, that's written like a lawyer.
ruin someone's life or cause them financial hardship. And then in 2-2, which is now G, about vehicles, machinery, or watercraft, I think that's very vague. Are they non-operational? Are they not registered? Because there might be a property in town that has boats and several vehicles that are registered and stored properly, but that isn't really specific as to how that's blight.
All under zoning right anyway.
The number of recreational vehicles. What is that?
What is the
And
number?
then register as well.
Right. The one of each type, like a trailer or a camper
Mhm.
and one boat. If it's different.
Okay,
Recreational vehicles, one of each. The way the reg is written right now, it's to be stored in.
mhm,
And we're actually changing that. Proposing to change it, say. That here is, proposing that to include the side yard, because there are some neighborhoods that side yard screen. There's just no room.
right. That's what I had highlighted here. I just,
So your first one was in the definition of the community standard.
right.
And basically the notice, this needs to be a more reasonable standard.
Right.
Those are the covers you had.
Yes, thank you.
Alan, Charlie?
Yep, I've got a couple. So I agree with Sarah.
Help me out on page numbers too when you're doing this, please.
Yep, so I agree with the standard thing, and the, community standard definition is just, it needs to be more, I think it needs to be broader, actually. It shouldn't be on one person's opinion. And then I agreed also with page 5, with, the rubber, the vehicles, machinery, and watercraft. I think if that pertains to a certain ordinance we already have or zoning compliance we already have, it should reference that.
Or it shouldn't be in there at all.
Right, or it shouldn't be there in here at all because we already have the ordinance. Or this should be more specific to say registered vehicles and, or unregistered vehicles, I mean, and unoperational machinery and or watercraft. It's too vague. And the only other one that I had that hasn't been mentioned yet is this on the same page, 2-T2C. Where is it? Under walls, exterior walls, including retaining walls, which are defaced by graffiti and or contain holes, breaks, loose or rotting materials, or which are not properly surface coated. I don't think it really matters whether they're surface coated. I think that section should be struck, whether they're surface coated to prevent deterioration. And if they're not surface coated, they're going to deteriorate. They're going to fall under this, the rest of this eventually. I don't think it should be up to us to enforce whether someone has surface coated or painted a wall. And some walls don't even require surface coating or.
Yeah, this is specifically pointing to circumstance where like the exit 45.
Okay.
That's specifically what that's.
Right, and I'm okay with the graffiti and the breaks, but having that surface coated, I don't think that should be something we should be policing, whether he has those stones surface coated or whether someone has a stone wall or a brick wall or a cement wall surface coated. I don't think that's something we should be policing, because all different walls are made of all types of different materials. Some need to be surface coated, some do not. And that was all I had.
H.
Right, H, on the bottom of page 5, I just think that, I kind of waffled about this last time, and the more I thought about it, and I talked to more people, and I came down that there's really, we just don't need it in there, we need to just cut H completely. And then I is, it says vegetation of any type, which now says which is injurious to public health or safety. And so I thought like, okay, well, if it's, when would we care as a government, if somebody has poison ivy or giant hogweed or Venus flytraps on their property, it's unfortunate, but none of our business, right? So at first I was thinking we should also strike that, but the one situation where I could see where vegetation might be injurious to public health or safety is if we're in a drought condition and somebody has basically a hayfield all around their house and it's a small lot area, and if it caught fire, it could catch fire to other structures. So I don't know if maybe, that is leave I in there with some adjustments to reflect that, or just leave I in there like it is. But I certainly think that H should be going. And, one, I just think people who keep their grass on, it's nobody's business. And two, the trend is now going to, no mow lawns and different types of lawns, and not just the let's mow it every Thursday night with beer, kind of lawns. So I think that we just don't need that in there. But I think this is important to have a blight ordinance. It's hard to do. We tried to do it in 2011 and pass something, and it wasn't enforceable. So I'm glad that we are actually making sure it isn't enforceable, and it is, I think, time well spent, because a lot of people have issues with neighbors and whatnot that, they're taxpayers too. They need some sort of way to get the situation dealt with. And I think it's getting.
So I agree that H should come out. And I don't think tinkering around with I is really going to get anywhere meaningful, so I would just take I out too. I think that circumstance you described about the dried hay and drought conditions on a small lot in close proximity to the property probably doesn't exist.
I mean, I was really reaching for a reason. That's the only thing that comes. So yeah, I'm good with getting real high too.
Did you have any other comments?
That's it. I agree with everything they said.
I will add that, it was brought up in public participation that, this originally we had a lot of negative comments about this, but I can say that I particularly know of an instance right now where someone cannot sell their home because of a neighbor and the conditions of the home that they are trying to sell in that neighborhood. They have repeatedly gotten comments from the realtor, we'd love to buy this house, but because of the neighbor, it's a no. So I really do feel that there is a need for this.
I think if there are no other comments, that's a good place to leave this for tonight. We've got some notes. We'll workshop it again and bring it back. This is, the government sausage being made. This is how you write a law or an ordinance, do it in public with discussion and edits. So with that, I'd like to ask for the board of selectmen to go into recess. I'd like a motion to go into recess so we can do the timing.
Make a motion to go to recess for town meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I
All opposed? We are in recess at 7:29. Madam Clerk, you want to come up? Thank you. Selectman Baker, you want to pass out the questions, please? Sure. Number one is lengthy. Yeah, there's two. There's one.
Whatever you said. Sure.
I'll try this. Let's see what happens. Okay, it is 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the special town meeting to order. 7:30. Thank you, Amy. First item of business is the election of a moderator. Are there nominations? Mr. Anderson,
I'd like to nominate Jason Bowles as moderator.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Motion by Paul Anderson, second by Alan Baker. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, a motion would be in order to close nominations.
Move nominations be closed.
Charlie, is that you?
Yeah.
Made by Charlie, seconded by Sarah. Any discussion on closing nominations? All in favor of closing nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All in favor of Jason Bowser as moderator, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I'm now going to ask the town clerk to read the town meeting public notice. Madam Clerk.
Just bear with me because this is a long one. Warning, notice a special town meeting and referendum vote by voting machine, East Windsor, Connecticut. All electors and persons qualified to vote in town meetings of the town of East Windsor, Connecticut, the town, are hereby notified that the Board of Selectmen of the town are convening a special town meeting to be held at Town Hall, 11 Rice Street, Broadbrook, Connecticut, at 7:30 p.m. on July 21st, 2022 for the following purposes. Item number 1. To consider and discuss, but not vote on the appropriation of $5 million for the cost of an additional and renovations to the Scout Hall Youth Center, Community Center project, including but not limited to the cost of materials, construction, renovation, site improvements and restoration, permitting and inspection, and the purchase and installation of equipment and furnishings, and all alterations, repairs and improvements in connection therewith, as well as engineering, architectural, and temporary and permanent financing costs, and to meet said appropriation and in lieu of a tax, therefore authorize that up to 1.2 million of the town's capital and non-recurring fund balance to be used to finance a portion of the appropriation and authorize bonds to be issued pursuant to Chapter 109 of the Connecticut General Statutes as amended, the town charter, or any other provisions of law thereto enabling an amount not to exceed 3.8 million or so much thereof as may be necessary after deducting grants or other sources of funds available, therefore to finance the balance of such appropriation, and the first selectman and the town treasurer to be authorized to issue and sell bonds or temporary notes of the town not to exceed 3.8 million in anticipation of the receipt of the proceeds from sale of such bonds, and to determine the amount, date of maturity, interest rate, form, and all other details of such notes and bonds, and the first selectman is authorized to apply for grants related to the projects and is authorized to execute all agreements, contracts, certificates, and any other documents necessary for the completion and financing of the project. The full text of this resolutions adopted by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance concerning the Scout Hall Youth Center are available for review at the town clerk's office. All those persons qualified to vote in town meetings of the town are hereby further notified that pursuant to Section 7.7 of the Connecticut General Statutes and the town charter, the Board of Selectmen have removed the above item on the call of this special town meeting for submission to the voters of the town who are qualified to vote at town meetings for yes or no vote by voting machine on the following question. Shall the town of East Windsor, the town, appropriate $5 million, the appropriation for the cost of an addition and renovations to the Scout Hall Youth Center, Community Center project, authorize that up to 1.2 million of the town's capital and non-recurring fund balance be used to finance a portion of the appropriation and authorized bonds to be issued in an amount not to exceed 3.8 million to finance the balance of such appropriation. The vote will be conducted at the town's 2 polling places during the hours between 6 o'clock a.m. and 8 o'clock p.m. on November 8th, 2022. Item number 2, to consider and vote on the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen that the town meeting, as the legislative body for the town of East Windsor, authorize the first selectman to submit a grant application on behalf of the town requesting the sum of $5 million from the Community Investment Fund administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development in support of the town of East Windsor Community Center renovation and expansion project, dated at East Windsor, Connecticut, this 15th day of July, 2022. East Windsor Board of Selectmen, Jason E. Bowser, First Selectman, Marie DeSouza, Deputy Selectman, Sarah Muska, Selectman, Alan Baker, Selectman, and Charlie Nordell, Selectman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, I'm now going to read the eligibility to vote. This is Connecticut General Statutes 7-6. At any town meeting or other regular or special town election, or at any meeting of any fire, sewer, or school district, or any other municipal subdivision of any town incorporated by any special act, any person who is an elector of such town may vote, and any citizen of the United States over the age of 18 years or more who jointly or severally is liable to the town, district, or subdivision for taxes assessed against them and an assessment of not less than $1,000 on the last completed grand list of such town, district, or subdivision, or who would be so liable if not entitled to an exemption under Connecticut General Statute subdivision 17, 19, 22, 23, 25, or 26 of section 12-81 may vote unless otherwise restricted by the provisions of any special act relating to such town, district, or subdivision. So that is that. Would whoever has resolution number 1, please read that.
Sarah Muska, 25 Maple Avenue. Item number 1, to consider and discuss, but not to vote on, the appropriation of $5 million for the costs of an addition and renovations to the Scout Hall Youth Center, Community Center project, including but not limited to the cost of materials, construction, renovation, site improvements and restoration, permitting and inspection, and the purchase and installation of equipment and furnishings, and all alterations, repairs, and improvements in connection therewith, as well as engineering, architectural, and temporary and permanent financing costs, and to meet said appropriation and in lieu of a tax, therefore, authorize that up to $1.2 million of the town's capital and non-reoccurring fund balance be used to finance a portion of the appropriation, and authorize bonds to be issued pursuant to Chapter 109 of the Connecticut General Statutes as amended, the town charter, or any other provision of law thereto enabling, in an amount not to exceed $3.8 million or so much thereof, as may be necessary after deducting grants and other sources of funds available, therefore to finance the balance of such appropriation, and the first selectman and the town treasurer be authorized to issue and sell bonds or temporary notes of the town not to exceed $3.8 million in anticipation of the receipt of the proceeds from the sale of such bonds, and to determine the amount, date of maturity, interest rate, form, and other details of such notes and bonds, and the first selectman is authorized to apply for grants related to the project and is authorized to execute all agreements, contracts, certificates, and other documents necessary for the completion and financing of the project. The full text of the resolutions adopted by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance concerning the Scout Hall Youth Center, Community Center project are available for review at the town clerk's office. All those persons qualified to vote in town meetings of the town are hereby further notified that pursuant to section 7-7 of the Connecticut General Statutes and the town charter, the Board of Selectmen have removed the above item on the call of this special town meeting for submission to the voters of the town who are qualified to vote at town meetings for yes or no vote by a voting machine on the following question. Shall the town of East Windsor, the town, appropriate $5 million, the appropriation, for the cost of an addition and renovations to the Scout Hall Youth Center, Community Center project, authorize that up to $1.2 million of the town's capital and non-reoccurring fund balance be used to finance a portion of the appropriation, and authorize bonds to be issued in an amount not to exceed $3.8 million to finance the balance of such appropriation. The vote will be conducted at the town's 2 polling places during the hours between 6:00 a.m. and 8:00 p.m. on November 8th, 2022. I move the foregoing resolutions be adopted.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. We're now going to move on to the discussion phase of this, and that's the only part that will happen tonight. As was alluded to in the call that Selectman Muska read, the Board of Selectmen have removed the determination of this question from the town meeting and placed it on the November ballot. That will allow all voters in the town of East Windsor who vote in the general election an opportunity to opine on whether or not this project should move forward. So as kind of a little bit wacky as it seems, the statutes require us to have this meeting to talk about this, and that's it tonight. The final determination on this won't be until November 8th. So I have a brief presentation for people not familiar with this, outlining what the project is and why we collectively think this is a good idea. And then we'll open it up for discussion and move on from there. So this slide shows the existing conditions at the senior center. It has spatial access issues. It has general space issues where you have activities happening all in one congregate space. There could be meals happening at the same time somebody is doing tax preparation seminars, at the same time somebody is being enrolled into a renter's rebate program or a Medicare program. The storage space is extremely limited. The space that we have cohabitates with the Broadbrook Fire Department. It was built with an understanding that we would be in that space for a period of approximately 20 years, and that period came to a close 22 years ago. So we are well beyond what the intended use of that space was at the point where the building was constructed. This slide shows the current conditions at the Town Hall Annex. We do the best we can with the space that we have available to us to make sure that it's adaptable, but it has constraints. You can see here the space that is the voting place for people who vote at the Town Hall Annex is used for food storage, aggregation, and in some cases distribution. Vaccine clinics or COVID testing clinics have been held there. And we also use it for certain parks and recreation programs. Sometimes those things, more than one of those things are happening at a time because that's the space that we have to build. The 2 photos here of the children, I think, are indicative, especially the 2 boys in the top photo. They're doing some sort of what looks to be an arts and crafts project. Maybe it's, you know, a glitter and glue sticks kind of thing. But the takeaway from that is those kids are in the hall because that's where the space is available to offer that program. So between the 2 spaces, you can see that we are not really well set up to meet the needs of our constituency. So existing limitations and needs. We don't have sufficient programming space for an adequate senior services program, for an adequate Parks and Rec program, and to accommodate some of the enrollment stuff that needs to happen around social services. Both locations are problematic in terms of access, whether you're pushing a stroller or wheelchair dependent or walker dependent. They are difficult to access. They were built for a different day. Aging, so East Windsor as a population is 10% older than Hardin County. That is data supported to say that our population naturally trends older. So we are not well positioned to be able to provide the services that people need to help age in place. And that's what people want right now. They don't want to be forced to make a determination about leaving their home or not as they get older. That we want to stay in places where we build our homes. And the town government is not well positioned to provide those services that we need. Case in point of this is that if you're enrolling in Medicare and in renter's rebate, 2 programs that the town helps administer, you have to go to 2 different locations with 2 different limitations in terms of access. That is not very constituent friendly, especially if you have mobility issues or transportation issues. We ought to be in a place where we can deliver all the services that people need in one central service location. Just recently, just this week, we ran into limitations with our Parks and Recreation summer camp programs. The inclement weather this week, actually, the heat this week required us to limit our summer camp program to half-day activity, and I think shut it down today. Because we don't have space to move those groups indoors where we are now. That's a problem that would also be rectified by adoption of this proposal. So we're going to try and consolidate all of our community services departments in one area. That is social services, senior services, and parks and recreation. Those areas are currently split between the town hall annex and the senior center. We're going to try and do that in such a way so that we're able to add adequate programming space that can be used by those departments during the day, during the week, so that if there is somebody who's giving tax advice or taking in medical information, that's not going to be held in earshot of the people who are doing some of the recreational programmings or having a congregate meal with friends and neighbors. This will address the spatial concerns that we have. It'll address the central location that we have, the central location need that we have, and it provides. This is the real linchpin of the whole thing. It would double the square footage of the existing Scout Hall building. It would provide adequate spacing for those three departments during the day, during the week, when there is a real need for it. And it would also increase space availability for youth groups and civic groups nights and weekends by sharing the space in a way that actually adds to our existing pool of meeting room space. But it doesn't tie anything up, more than what the normal operating window would be for either of those demographics. It also dovetails with additional state funding that we've also received for improvements at the Scout Hall facility. We received $800,000 in state bonds for the installation of lights at the Abbey Road soccer field and other parks improvements that are still to be determined. But the state has already given the town funding to invest in the location, and now we're looking to match that in a way and make an investment ourselves. So this is what the structure would look like once it's completed. It looks substantially similar to the existing facility. And that's on purpose. You can see, and we'll get to it later on, but there's renderings over there as well. What the plan is to keep the existing structure in place and build a ring around the building, 30 feet in every direction, so that we are able to move out a little bit, have a handicap accessible hallway separating the general assembly room from offices and programming space, and pick up that additional square footage. By doing it that way, it's not overly intrusive on the property, and it adds 8,000 square feet to the building, which doubles it. That's another rendering of what the final product could look like. This shows the floor plan, and you can see the ring that I was talking about. This is existing. This is existing. Everything else would be added on. There's been talk by the folks at the Scout Hall Building Committee over time, and this would be a nice addition for the town as well. That as a potential phase 2 of this, if we were able to get the money for that down the road, and it would be down the road. It's not something that is planned for this project. It would be down the road. Would be the construction of a standalone gymnasium that could become a better home for our youth basketball programs, maybe some adult leagues that are happening. This is a side-by-side comparison of what the building would look like from each direction. This is my favorite slide of all. The town of Windsor Locks, by our own good fortune, happens to be doing a substantially similar project. They are doing a senior center, whereas the town of East Windsor is proposing to do a community center, multi-generational facility. Theirs would be about 20,000 square feet. Our final project would be about 15,000 square feet. Their project cost is about $14 million, whereas ours would be $5 million. And the reason for that is because we already own the land, we already own the building, and most of the needed infrastructure is already in place. That substantially reduces the project costs. So for a third of what the town of Windsor Locks is paying for something substantially similar, the town of East Windsor could really see an increase in our service delivery. So the total project cost is $5 million. We already have, from last year's budget surplus, with the support of the Board of Finance, moved $1.2 million from the operating budget into a capital non-recurring fund for this project. That means that we are left to come up with $3.8 million. This is the project timeline, and we are to my great surprise, right on schedule. In June, the Board of Finance transferred that $1.2 million into a CNR fund for this project. We have negotiated a lease agreement with the Scout Hall Building Committee, which has been a very amicable process this whole way. This is a partnership that we're looking at to meet our joint needs of delivering services to youth in East Windsor, but also to seniors in East Windsor. Right now, we're at that August point, we're ahead of schedule, where the town meeting is going to discuss this project. We have already accomplished the September 8th deadline, which is to finalize the ballot question, which will appear on the November 8th ballot. There's a statutory deadline by which that needs to happen. We have satisfied that. So I'll draw your attention to the October-November timeline, and then I'll expand on that a little bit. Final notice of congressionally directed spending award. So our congressional delegation, Senator Murphy, Senator Blumenthal, and Congressman Larson reached out in April-ish with an opportunity for the town to submit congressionally directed spending project applications. That's the new buzzword for earmarks. If you remember back in the day when Congress did earmarks, that's the new designation for that. So there were 4 projects that were submitted. This is project number 2, and it has a fair degree of likelihood of being funded, but we won't know that until Congress adopts the FY23 federal budget. That's not going to happen until sometime in Q4. At the same time, and the second question that we're going to talk about tonight, the town has been invited to submit an application for what's called the Community Investment Fund, which is a state-run program funded through American Rescue Plan Act dollars for transformative projects within the community. Only 54 towns in Connecticut are eligible and invited to submit applications for that. And this project is catered to what the criteria of that grant is. So we'll be applying for funding with the town meeting's approval. We'll be applying for funding for that funding as well. If we get congressionally directed spending, they would pay for 55% of the project cost. So they would pay for 55% of $5 million, which is just shy of $2.8 million. Plus the $1.2 million that the town has already set aside would leave us just $1 million that we needed to ask the voters to bond in November. If we were to get the Community Investment Fund funding, they could provide up to $3.8 million in project costs, leaving the town only to get permission to build the thing. There would be no need to bond anything at all. If we don't get either of those things, we still can bond up to $10 million without increasing the town's debt service budget. That's the debt service is part of the operating budget. That is a significant thing. We can borrow up to $10 million without having to increase that. So if we still need it without getting any state or federal money, $3.8 million, we could bond that without changing our debt service budget. And that's going to be left to the voters to decide on November 8th. So this is the discussion portion of this. Is there any discussion? Mr. Anderson, name and address, please.
Well, Anderson, 89 Main Street, Broadbrook. I'm also president of the Scout Hall Building Committee. Get that out on the table. I've been in this town since December 1970, thereabouts. And in all my time, this is the best project I've ever seen. This is just what this community needs now. So the Scout Hall Building Committee has had many meetings and and we worked out all kinds of things, and everything is hunky-dory with us. So all I can say is we need to vote yes. Thank you.
Other comments?
Yeah, I've got a question. Rick Webster, 80swood Drive. One time in Boy Scouts. My concern, reason I came down here is to see this project going on. Back in 2000, Mr. Anderson, part of this group, John Burnham, instrumental in getting this building built. My concern is that the youth of this town, the youth groups, they're not going to have equal access on this because the town's going to be basically taking it over. And my concern is that community groups or people are going to rent this space and the scouts aren't going to have the building. They won't be first priority as it has been in the past. And the other question I have is, who's going to be the coordinator for this? Who does somebody go to, like a youth group, and says, hey, I need this building. I've got an Eagle Scout ceremony coming up Saturday at 1 o'clock. Who's gonna be the coordinator for this? Who's gonna run this?
Sure, I'll address both of those, and then if there's other comments on Mr. Webster's comment. The first and foremost, the cohabitation of the building makes sense from the perspective that the town's primary use for this, from a department's perspective, is the senior center during the day, during the week. They don't use the facility, nor would they likely use the facility nights or weekends. The very times where there is going to be a need for youth and civic groups nights and weekends. So it makes sense for us to invest in a structure that could be cohabitating. Now, your question about how would it be maintained? And by the way, that is codified and protected in an MOU between the town and the Scout Hall Building Committee, that we would be true to their mission, that there would still be access for those groups when they needed them. The administration of it would run through the town's myrec.com software, which is the same way that space is currently requisitioned at the Annex, or if your kids are enrolling in the summer camp program. It all runs through a software web-based system, not unlike what is used by Mrs. Masters now with her calendar. Yes, sir.
Additional comment. The memo of understanding that we have already executed and filed with the town clerk gives youth groups first priority on access. So that won't change. It stays the same. Whether or not it comes to parties and stuff, there's a good chance it won't be any. As far as private parties renting the space, that may not be comfortable for the town to manage. So it's not a guarantee, but it's likely that won't take place.
Yes, sir.
Jerry Rudolph, 11 South Road. I was involved with Scouts and youth organizations for over 30 years in Connecticut and in Massachusetts. And what I found is, being on the boards of directors, we don't just call up and say, on Friday, we want to have a ceremony. Usually those dates can be tentatively reserved ahead of time. And then if for any reason you don't have enough people for the ceremony, the unit can cancel it. But the town should not be able to say, oh, by the way, you have to move your ceremony from Saturday at 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening to a Tuesday and 3 months from now. So it'd be done. Been there, done that, and thank God it's over.
Other comments? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
Peter Sanders, 2 North Main Street, Farmers Point. Just wonder how many entrances there will be to the building in regards to if the scouts want to come in and use one of the meeting rooms or ceremonial rooms and say that another group wants to come in. Can they be separated by going in from different locations so they don't mix and match? Is that something on the plan? I haven't had a chance to look at the plan, or do they all have to come in one door?
No, there are different points of egress, but there's also, we're constructing the hallway around the perimeter of the large assembly room for specifically that purpose. So if there's a Boy Scout group in one of the meeting rooms and the Lions Club is meeting in another meeting room, and for whatever reason, there's a school dance happening all at the same time, you could conceivably get to each of those places without interfering or interrupting the others. Not the greatest example, but you get my point. Other questions or comments?
Again, Peter Sanders, I think it's time that the town moved forward on something like this. We've been pretty antiquated in our whole facility structure. Addition to the town. I'm concerned, I've said to other people, is that will there be transportation from, say, the old senior center to the new senior center? If this is approved, how will people, if they can't get around, how will they be transported? Again, buses and stuff like that. But is there going to be someplace in Broad Brook that could collectively move people at one time for like a lunch program. So,
Yeah, so we have 2.5 full-time drivers now that provide shuttle service to and from the senior center, as well as certain errands that people may need to run. Those programs are going to continue. So the end destination, is somewhat immaterial to that, because we will continue to provide the same service that we do. I don't think there's going to be a particular bus stop per se, but we do door-to-door pickup now, and that would continue. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
It's Rightly, 27 Harrington Road. The town annex, what will that be used for? And you also pointed out that it's not easily accessible for strollers or any of that. So what's the future going to be there?
So that's a two-pronged question. One of them hasn't been determined as of yet. But there is likely a need for some reconfiguration around the police department as they advance in accreditation standards. They're currently what's called tier 1 accreditation. In order to get to tier 2, they need to make some structural changes that this would allow for. It also would allow us to effectively move the emergency management office out of the police department proper and into some of the community service spaces that's being vacated. That actually makes more sense for that space. Long term, and that's all in the new part of the building. There is still a need to figure out what we're going to do with the part of the old school building that's currently just used for storage. There is a need to determine that, and we don't have an answer on that yet. But that is not a part of the project or the cost.
I think it's a great project. It's a win-win for the whole community. Don't waste money.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
Wayne Sherry, 119 Depot Street. What are you gonna have for security around here? There's a lot of young kids, a lot of old people. They're very vulnerable, both parties. Are you gonna have cameras? You gonna have it? How are you gonna approach that? There seems to be a lot of up in your questions about security lately around the whole country. I just have to have that as a concern of mine.
So the space is predominantly going to be used, well, it's always going to be used when chaperoned. The senior center operates when staff is in place. It doesn't happen when staff is off book. Same thing with the youth groups and the activity in the evening. They're not on their own. It's not a club. It's a facility that's chaperoned and programmed. Not to put you on the spot, Joe, but do you know, has the engineer talked about security considerations or cameras?
Cameras, the directors talked about cameras. She wants cameras in certain areas and to be able to monitor like the fitness room and that kind of stuff, the hallways. And we were going with an elaborate, a fob system like we have here, like the schools have. So the doors will, doors can get locked separately, that kind of stuff. All the doors, some of the meeting room, some of the program rooms won't be locked, but there won't be anything in there. But the majority of the doors, there'll be a central, like we have here, all the fob system, that kind of stuff.
There will be security cameras.
Yes, there will be some cameras in the hall and
We
like we have here. We have cameras in the hall here. We have cameras on the exterior of the building.
There's quite a bit of municipal space that's currently cameraed that people don't realize, up to and including the town park. So, in the event that there is untoward activity, we can watch that remotely. It's recorded. It's stored for 15 or 30 days. So we have more security than people realize.
And then it's monitored by the police. All the parks and the parking lots, this building, they have it right up on one of their screens.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, again, because this item has been removed from the call of the town meeting agenda, voters will be able to make a determination as to whether or not this project moves forward on November 8th. So I'll move on to item number 2. Oh, I'm sorry. Noreen or Nicole, do you have any comments, or Peg for that matter? Do you have any comments you'd like to add about the project?
I'm all set, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm all set, Jason.
Item number 2. Who has item number 2, please? Yes, sir.
Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street, item number 2. To consider and vote on the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen at the town meeting as the legislative body for the town of East Windsor, authorize the first selectman to submit a grant application on behalf of the town requesting the sum of $5 million from the Community Investment Fund administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development in support of the town of East Windsor Community Center renovation and expansion project. I move the foregoing resolution be adopted.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? Second. So this is a legislative body authorization for the town to submit a grant to the Community Investment Fund. Again, this is we're one of 54 towns eligible to submit grant fund requests for this. This is going to be there will be 10 opportunities to submit funding through this program, and there is an established list of criteria for what are acceptable projects. Those application windows are expected to happen twice per year for the next 5 years. So this is the project that we're intending to submit in the first round of the first year, which is the deadline for this is Monday night. We are required to provide a very extensive application narrative, legislative support letters from our state legislators, and we have them from all 3. A letter of support from the town, which I have written, but we also need authorization from the town's legislative body, and the town of East Windsor, the town meeting is our legislative body. So we actually need permission from the town meeting to apply for the grant, which seems like they would expect permission to accept the grant, but that's how they're doing it. So are there any questions or comments on this? I'll also add that we do expect that the outstanding project cost is $3.8 million. The resolution says that we're applying for $5 million, but the state requires a non-state match for that. So we've met with them. We've explained to them, where we are in our planning process, that the project is effectively shovel ready, that there is funding in place, that there is a long-term agreement with Scout Hall Building Committee. All of those things they are aware of. So we're submitting an application for the full project with the understanding that they will only fund up to $3.8 million. Any questions or discussion?
Jason Noreen Farmer, 247 South Water Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any idea on the timeline if you apply for this first round on Monday? Like how long does it take?
So the applications are due to be submitted by midnight on Monday night into Tuesday. They have explained in the number of webinars I participated in that there's a governance board, Community Investment Fund board. It's housed within DECD and populated actually mostly out of the legislative branch. They will make recommendations on projects to be funded to the governor by September 8th, I think. The governor has he can either forward those recommendations onto the State Bond Commission or he can reject them. But if he rejects them, he needs to explain in writing why. And the Bond Commission is expected to act sometime again in Q4. They're saying in early December, but my guess is it would be in late October. That's an educated guess. But
Thank you.
Any other comments? Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. With no further business to come before the town meeting, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Move we adjourn the town meeting at 8:10 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. It's non-debatable. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 8:10 p.m. Thank you, Madam Clerk. It's 8:13. I'm going to call the meeting of the Board of Selectmen back to order. Our next item of business is agenda item 9A, discussion of added appropriations requests. So I want to have a little PowerPoint here to walk through and then we can have a discussion. So the fund balance is once again over the maximum allowable capacity allowed by our town policy. We are at 21.96%. Policy allows for a maximum of 20%. That's driven by, so far, by the end of the year revenue surplus of 675,000, almost exclusively driven by real estate transactions. So those are additional revenues being brought in by the town clerk's office, the planning department, and the building department. We do still have a small surplus on the expenditure side from the last fiscal year of about $200,000. And both of those numbers do not include anything at all being returned from the Board of Education, which we do expect that won't be the case. There will be something likely to be returned back from their side once the books are closed. So absent that, we're at 21.96%, which is roughly $900,000. So in order to spend that down, which is what the policy requires, there are a number of projects that I worked with Amy O'Toole on that have been vetted through the CIP process to some degree or other. The first most pressing one that we must do, well, we must do the project. We don't necessarily need to do funding here, but I highly recommend we do, is designate money for the architecture and engineering work to replace the high school. That is a town asset. It's been the top priority of CIP for a number of years. Having the architecture and engineering done allows the project to be considered turnkey and ready to go. We can't bond for the project until we have the cost. We can't have the cost until we have the architecture and the engineering done. The Board of Education, as I know there, is left in a position where they're spending money year over year just to patch it. And that's money that's in the 5-figure range. So they're throwing money, put money after that every year just to keep the thing from leaking. We need to fix it. The good news is this $200,000 is part of the reimbursable funds that come from the state. So we'll get approximately 60% of that back once the project closes. So it's really an investment in our own infrastructure. Project number 2, the loader at the Department of Public Works is 23 years old and is no longer reliable. It is the main way that we load snow plows with sand in the wintertime. If that breaks during a snowstorm, we're waiting for the snow to melt. I say that, somewhat tongue in cheek, but that is a major problem that if it goes down and it goes down at the wrong time, where we are in a bad way. The repair costs are costly and escalating. Replacement costs will continue to escalate. So we're looking to try and get ahead of this, knowing that this is a major piece of equipment that services the town in a number of ways, not just from loading plow trucks, but also any type of debris removal. The gas pump replacement. This is something that we talked about during the budget process. CIP funded it, although only with a nominal amount of $10,000. It's going to cost about $270,000 to replace that. That is the main source of fuel that provides gas for police, public works, fire service, senior center, town vehicles, and WPCA. The way that it is currently structured, it's actually too small for us to realize any economies because in order to get gas to our gas pump, you need to ship it. And with shipping costs coming out of New Haven at, I think diesel is still up around $6 a gallon. You're getting fewer and fewer opportunities to ship that into a relatively small storage space. So we're having some supply issues that are emergent there. And that's not likely to persist, but it is a problem right now. And it's one that we could fix with a larger facility. The other piece of this is that at some point, the DEP is going to take note of the antiquated pump system that still runs on a DOS-based platform. And they're going to tell us we can't use it anymore. In which case this emergency problem becomes an immediate emergency. Oops. Yeah, and the fourth piece is open space funding. This is something that folks in town have been asking for a while. Our open space fund had been up around $250,000 at a point in time. It's currently down to about 70,000. It was depleted when the town partnered with the Department of Agriculture and the Natural Resources Conservation Service to acquire the development rights on property on Rye Street. It's slowly working its way back up, but it's not at a point in time where they can adequately partner if there's another opportunity to preserve development rights or to buy property in fee simple. So with the additional surplus, my proposal is to put $150,000 into the open space fund. So where would that leave us? The total project costs are $910,000, and it would leave us at about 19.8% funded in the fund balance. Again, before any returns from the Board of Education. So we would still be in a remarkably healthy position while checking off a number of things that have been sitting on the CIP list for a long time. Those are the products. Comments?
I guess I'll start with, these are the kind of things that we put off all the time. It's really nice to finally be able to get them done. I think that, I don't know how long that high school roof has been on there, just sitting there. So I think this is a great opportunity for all the projects.
I agree with Alan. It's a great use of the money. And I know I've been here for many conversations on open space funding, and I think it's great to put 150,000 towards that, and agreed the high school roof has been a topic of conversation for many years and it needs to be done. So yeah, I'm good with all this.
All right.
I don't have anything to add.
So in order to move this forward, we need to recommend an added appropriation in those specific amounts to the Board of Finance and then forward to a town meeting. These are all dollar amounts that exceed what can be done without a town meeting approval, but none of them would require anything beyond a town meeting at this point. When we go out, once we're prepared, once we have a budget number on the high school roof, we will have to bond that, and that will have to be done through a referendum. But we can schedule referendums relatively quickly once we have budget numbers in place.
We're recommending this directly at the town meeting.
No, Board of Finance.
Board of Finance.
That's why they're meeting in August.
No, I remember that.
Go ahead, were you gonna say something?
I just have one question. Does anyone know whether the school roof project can be done while school is in session, or does it have to be done under the summer recess?
I've asked Dr. Tudor that. He's checked with the companies that are likely to bid on it. And they've said that because of the scope of the project, because it is the entire roof system, it'll have to be done in the off season. So you're looking at probably summer of 24. I spoke with him about it as recently as yesterday. No, today.
Do you need a motion separate for each one, or can we do all?
You can do all of them.
I've read that long thing. You go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the 4 project requests. Number 1, 200,000 for the East Windsor High School roof replacement engineering. Number 2, loader replacement, 300,000. 3, gas pump replacement for 260,000. 4, open space funding for 150,000. And send that to the Board of Finance
And do a town meeting.
into a town meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, folks. I'm going to ask that we table agenda 9B until after executive session. I have a motion.
I'll move to table item 9B, discussion of farm leases until after executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Peg, I'm guessing everybody was, are you abstaining?
Oh, no, that was a 9.
Peg, that was unanimous.
It is unanimous, yes.
So we're on the tax refunds.
I'll move to approve the tax refunds totaling $836.89.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, unanimous again. Good.
Yeah.
Selectmen's reports. So the town is hard at work, as we all just witnessed, developing the grant application for the community investment fund. So that will be submitted by the end of the day on Monday. I alluded to this also during the town meeting, but we're in the process of developing the scope of work for the installation of lights at the Abbey Road soccer field. That is state funded and something that's been on our capital wish list for a long time, but it's great to see it actually happening. I want to thank Senator Anwar, Representative Hall, and Representative Foster for their advocacy in front of the bond commission to get the funds for that project. July is property tax collection month, and I want people to be aware that there have been issues associated with the U.S. Postal Service, both in terms of bills being sent out to taxpayers and in terms of payments being received back by the town. There was a little bit of a snafu where mail designated for 11 Rye Street has been sitting in the post office in the town of Summers, and the post office is working to rectify that. So we're aware of the issue. We worked with the post office to correct the problem. But if you haven't received your tax bill yet, please call the tax collector's office at 623-8904. Both political parties have a primary election on August 9th. Polls will be open at the usual polling places from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Party endorsed candidates for U.S. Senate, probate judge, secretary of the state, and state treasurer will be selected in that race. Board of Selectmen have now reviewed for a second time the blight ordinance, and we're going to take a third crack at that once there are some revisions. On July 8th, I joined volunteers at the Trolley Museum to welcome Governor Lamont to town to announce the Connecticut Summer at the Museum program. It provides free admission to children at more than 130 museums around the state, which will run through September 5th. We were delighted to see that the Trolley Museum was selected as the showpiece for that announcement. And the governor even enjoyed driving one of the trolleys. One of the comments he made is nobody's let me drive anything in 4 years. So he had a good time with that. On July 19th, I was very happy to join the East Windsor Park and Recreation Summer Camp Program to read to some of our local campers. We read 2 books about what it means to be part of a community, and the campers and I discussed ways that they are already helping their friends and family. A lot of them do the dishes, and I'm not sure why my 3-year-old isn't yet. We're going to talk about that when we get home. I got to say that was really a cool thing. That was one of the highlights of the week for me because they were very engaged in the stories and looked forward to the conversation, and it was a lot of fun. Coming up on August 2nd is this year's National Night Out. The event will be held in the evening at East Windsor Park and will feature our summer concert for that week, as well as social and community service agencies that are networking with members of our community. It's always a great event, and I encourage people to attend. Finally, I want to share a really inspiring story, and Charlie knows about this one too. A local gentleman is involved with some humanitarian assistance work in Ukraine. And prior to his most recent trip over to the war-torn part of the world, he reached out to the East Windsor Ambulance Association, who provided emergency trauma medical supplies to be brought over there. Those supplies will go directly where they were most needed and to provide emergency medical services to those in the war zone. So I want to thank the East Windsor Ambulance Association for their generosity. That's all I have, and I will turn to Alan.
Okay, so planning and zoning, they approved, nothing big, but they had a tattoo salon on Route 140, a small family subdivision, like 3 lots, and in addition for USA Hauling. So I guess the message is we got to get economic development out there cracking, so they have something big to do. They haven't had a big application in a while. So that's it for them. Wetlands, same thing, a couple small applications, nothing complex. Broadbrook Fire Department had, they met last night, or no, Monday night. They had 54 calls in June. They didn't have a fire marshal report, so I don't have that for you for that night. Their budget is in good shape. They're under budget so far for the year. And the chair brought up the fact that if the Scout Hall modifications go through, if that is approved, then they need to start planning for how they're going to best use that space. So they're looking forward to utilizing that, as they are, as you said earlier, pretty jammed in over there. So, and finally, pension meeting met this week. The pension is down 16% this year. That's $6.7 million for the year so far. But on the other side of that, we looked at since inception with the current folks that are taking care of that for us, which happens to be exactly 10 years. They started, when they started with our money, it was, they had $14.4 million to invest. During that 10-year period, we had $15 million of contributions, $14 million of withdrawals, which people use in their pension. So that's a good number right there. And in the end, we, as of June 30, we have $32 million overall in there, which is a total earnings of $17 million over the 10 years. So, taking a long-term view, it's, not as bad as it seems today. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you, sir. Sarah?
Okay, on July 12th, I attended the Arts and Culture Committee meeting. Discussion amongst members occurred in regards to the first artist showcase, which was on June 30th. The feedback given was all very positive and there was a great turnout. I attended the second showcase, which was last Thursday, and it was very successful. And there will be a final one on National Night Out on August 2nd. The committee has already received inquiries from artists about having a space next year, and it is the Arts and Culture Committee's intention to participate next summer. Chairman Debbie Williams had a meeting scheduled with the East Windsor High School principal on July 18th. The topics that the committee would like to help facilitate it at the school includes painting parking spaces, a graduation project, and fabric decorations to be hung from the fence. I will follow up an update on how that meeting went. The committee is applying for a grant from the Supporting Arts Grant Program through the Connecticut Office of the Arts, which is a part of the Department of Economic and Community Development. The committee discussed possible projects they'd like to focus on in the future and decided to work on an arts and culture festival next year that would include art, music, and food. They will also be working on a photography contest in the near future and plan to vote on criteria at their next meeting. On July 18th, the Parks and Recreation Commission met. July is Parks and Recreation Month. In honor of this, there is a different activity or theme happening each day at East Windsor Park. There's also a photo contest, and families are encouraged to submit a photo enjoying one of our town parks, facilities, or events. The top 3 photos will be used as promotional materials for next year's Parks and Recreation Month ads, and they will also win a gift card. Please submit photos to dwilliams@eastwindsorct.com by July 31st to be considered. And if you're posting photos online, use the hashtag RiseUpJuly. Park Director Melissa Maltesi has been approached by families interested in dedicating a tree or a bench in memory of a loved one. The commission does not currently have a policy in place for memorial benches or trees. Some members have been asked to review a draft presented to them by Mrs. Maltesi, and we'll have a more thorough discussion and a possible vote to establish one at their next meeting. It was also brought to Chairman Szymanski by a resident of some possible improvements needed at Prospect Hill Park, including overgrown trees, issues with pavement, and no signage to find the park. Melissa Maltesi agreed to contact the Department of Public Works to take a look at the trees and reach out to a contractor to take a look at the needs for resurfacing and painting. Mrs. Maltesi reported that they are in their 4th week of summer camp at East Windsor Park, and they have about approximately 50 attendees this year. $2,415 has been brought in so far for swimming lessons. And there are 2 more sessions to go, and they are on projection to hit the budgeted $4,800. There are enrichment programs being offered in the next 2 weeks. One pertains to movie making, and the other is a babysitting safety class. And $7,643 have been collected so far this season, prior to last weekend at East Windsor Park, and there have been around 2,600 patrons that have visited our park. And that's all I have.
I've been about 30 of those.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Okay, that's pretty short and sweet. On Monday, the 11th, I attended the Wells Point Fire Department, their district meeting, and not much to report there. Standard things, budget is all set and good, just starting the year. in, normal volume of calls. Biggest talk of contention was how the foam was going to be, the PFAS foam was going to be removed from the fire trucks last Friday at Environmental Services in South Windsor. On the 13th, I attended the Board of Finance meeting where they did CIP transfers were approved for the following items: police cruisers, DPW vehicles, DPW roads, DPW drainage, DPW chip sealing, the IT GIS system, assessor reevaluations, DPW fuel tank replacement, and the DPW sidewalks that all the projects that have been put on the list there. As we talked about earlier tonight, the Scout Hall Community Center project financial approval was forwarded to a town meeting, which we had tonight. And a 3-year shared cost agreement was adopted and approved between the town of East Windsor and the Board of Education to specifically address the cost of mowing the lawn, string trimming, and lining the fields at the schools and inspection of the school playgrounds. And that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Public participation. This is public second opportunity to address the board. I'll first turn to anybody who's here present and then invite anybody who's with us online. Yes, sir. Name and address, please. Sorry.
Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street. Farm leases. Glad that got postponed, and I'm disappointed it got postponed at the same time. However, the previous administration, farm leases were thrown up for money as opposed to purpose. And I would encourage the board to give first priority to those farmers who have put the hard work and effort into turning town land into farmland that it wasn't when they started. So that's, they need high consideration. Thank you.
So I haven't spoken with the board in executive session yet, but our intention is to do that. It's just a real estate issue that's going to be privileged and then discussed openly in probably 20 minutes.
Go for it.
Any other discussion? Is there anyone online who would like to address the board of selectmen?
Jason Noreen Farmer, 247 South Water Street.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to thank you all as a collaborative board in the work you've been doing to finally start moving us forward in positive directions. You probably don't get thanks enough, and I just want you to know you're all appreciated.
Thank you very much. That's very nice to hear. If there's no further public participation, I'd ask for a motion to go into executive session. It would include just the 4 of us, and we'll do the same thing we did last time. We'll give the audience the room and we'll go down the hall.
We need to go into executive session.
There's a second, made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're in executive session at 8:37 p.m. It is 9:13. We're out of executive session. Now turn to call of the agenda for item 9B, discussion of farm leases. So through no fault of his, the Department of Agriculture rescinded a grant that was offered to Mr. Reichley that was going to be used for the restoration of overgrown farmland on Melrose Road. While there were initial assurances from the department that that funding would be available, the hoops that were made to jump through were copious. So it's not on the cards. So what the question before us is whether or not to amend the lease agreement between town and Reichley Farms LLC, keeping the same term, but backing out those parcels that parcel that had been included in the farm restoration grant. That's what the document in front of you does. And it also reduces the rental payment commensurate with the acreage. The per acre price stays the same, but the total rental cost comes down to reflect the diminished acreage. I think this is fair. I think it's a good thing to do. I'm disappointed that the Department of Agriculture didn't think it meritorious to try and bring farmland back into active production, but here we are. So I'd like a motion to accept this first amendment to the lease agreement between the town and Rankin Farms LLC and authorize my signature.
I move to accept the amended lease between the town of East Windsor and Reichley Farms LLC and authorize the first selectman to sign it.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Yes, thank you.
And also, I'll also move that the town of East Windsor issue a refund to Reichley Farms LLC for the amount of $2,880.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. I have no further business to come before the board, so I think the motion to adjourn would be in order.
I'll move we adjourn.
Second.
It's non-debatable. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 9:15 PM.